in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to thank those of you who have stamina and can last a long time staring at a screen, even when the pandemic is over, or no, it's not really over, but even when we mix in this hybrid world that we're in. I'm Caryn McTighe Musil, a senior fellow at the Association of American Colleges and University and a special advisor to the CLDE coalition. And what you've signed in for is like talking to people on the planes to make sure they're on the right plane. This session will focus on connecting civic and democratic learning with majors and with students' careers. I'm going to ask you as you come in to put in the chat I'm sorry, I'm going to switch the views. I'm going to ask you to put in the chat who you are, what university you're at, and most importantly, what department you're in, if you have a department or were in a department or now an administrator, just so we can have a sense of the range of disciplines that are here. And I'll give you time. You should do that while I'm just talking a little bit. We're going to give you space, those of you who are now participants, to pose questions, certainly in the chat at any time. I'll be trying to scan those so that I can feed those back to our three participants, our free panelists. I will also break the conversation of us so that there is time in the middle of the session and at the very end where you can again pose questions about something that had been said or share something from your own campus that seemed to clarify one of the things or be like one of the things or another version of one of the things. So we want your participation. Use the chat, abundantly. And if you, depending on how many there are, you can probably just raise your hand, use the iconic thing to raise your hand during those Q&A, and I'll try to call on you that way. I wanted to just quickly say in a minute or two how we began to focus on the major. Some of you may be aware that when Crucible Moment, College Learning and Democracy's Future was published in 2012 as out of the White House and at the White House, it was a Department of Education grant. The task of that I co-directed with Larry Braskamp was to bring practitioners and thinkers and policymakers together to say, where was higher education in its job of educating students to be informed, responsible participants in a diverse democracy like ours? And what could we do to make it better? And one of the things we learned that only about 1/3 of the students had their civic awareness, knowledge, or experience heightened through college, which meant 2/3 of them did not. The one other thing that we learned was that most of the enormous success, and there has been wonderful creative pedagogies, and probably the most profoundly ubiquitous and influential high impact is service learning, was more than half of students, I think something like 53% of students have service learning in the first year or two of their college education. And but we learned that by the time they graduate, that number only goes up to 56, which means something stops. It's as if the roads to civic learning are washed out. And we then had as one of the key recommendations coming out of Crucible Moment that the major, the area of the departmental major, particularly in certain majors, some more than others, we can talk about that, were unseeded. One of the metaphors I sometimes use is a picture of a field that is just got nothing growing on it. And the key, what I then began to run for 5 years, was an effort to find out who's doing this out there. How do we help other people do it? And that is what I turn my attention to. I will probably say a few things about why the major and doing the work of the major is so important. But I think I want to go ahead and get started by letting our participants talk. And I will put that research into the chat and do that in between things. The first question that I wanted to pose was to say that one of the things we learned in the 5-year initiative of civic prompts in the major was that departments were learning how important it was to put civic learning as a piece of the learning outcomes of the major, not just of the school or not just of gen ed, but of the major, and to scaffold experiences to hone those knowledge, skills, values, and practices and sense of agency across the major, not in a single course at the end or only at the beginning. So what we've brought for you are 2 people, one from communications and one from the Division of Chemistry and Biochemistry, as well as a student in environmental science, to talk about what their experience has been, how they designed their work. And the very first question is that one about design. We have Dr. Nasrin Mirsaleh-Kohan, who is the division lead at the Texas Women's University. She herself is an associate professor of physics and teaches those courses within the Division of Chemistry and Biochemistry. And Dr. Theresa Castor will be talking about communications. She's interim program and interim vice provost of academic affairs at University of Wisconsin-Parkside. So I'm going to, and I'm going to ask Raven, to talk about her experience as an environmental science undergraduate and graduate student at Texas Women's. So let me begin with you, Theresa, and to talk a little bit about what you're doing at University of Parkside and what the design looks like that you've come up with.
Okay, thank you, Caryn. Let's see. What I want to do is start by providing a little bit of context. Let's see. Caryn mentioned I have held a few different positions. I'm currently vice provost. I'm also a member of the communication department where I was chair from 2015 through 2021. And a third role that I've held on campus is as the faculty director of internships working out of our Alan E. Guskin Center for Community and Business Engagement. And that was a role I was in for the last couple of years. I want to share that information because as I talk through the afternoon, I'm going to be speaking from and drawing from examples from each of those different hats. But first, focusing on the overall institutional context as well as my department. Okay. University of Wisconsin-Parkside is located in Southeast Wisconsin. We're one of 13 UW system campuses, and we're primarily an undergraduate campus, but we have a growing number of graduate students, and we're a fairly diverse campus, both in terms of racial ethnic diversity as well as age. We're also a Carnegie designated campus for community engagement. With regards to my department, well, I guess to lead off with the headline news, we were recently the UW System award winner for the Region's Teaching Excellence Award. We're the 8th largest major on campus, and given the size of our major, that means we have 99 students, 6 full-time faculty members, and again, fairly diverse in terms of the makeup of our students, as well as the programs that we offer in the department. Now, thinking about design, it starts with our learning goals. And I just have the 6 learning goals on the left side of the screen, highlighting what the key topics are of those. But what I want to highlight is that as a theme in those learning goals, we engage issues related to applying them to oneself, thinking about them in civic context as well as professional context. And also we try to have a balance between understanding these learning goals from the disciplinary knowledge perspective, but also knowing how to apply them in various hands-on contexts. With the learning goals, I do also want to add that this is based on, I guess, long-time practices in our department. And specifically, before I even entered the department was talking about ways to think about the curriculum in forward-looking ways. Specifically, when I entered the department, there is an essay written by one of our faculty members published in 1993. The faculty member's name is Lana Rakow, and the essay is called "The Curriculum is the Future." I just want to read a couple of quotations from there. The curriculum is not simply a thermometer that measures the state of the field. It is a thermostat that regulates its future direction. If we want to change the future, we must change the curriculum. And so it's that in mind that the department decided to focus on the curriculum in ways that were forward-looking and not just about exclusively professional development, but also how to engage students in the world. So one of the ways we've done that is through high impact practices. And what I want to highlight about the design is how the high impact practices are embedded in our curriculum. So we have a series of core courses. And I just have a partial listing of the core courses that have various high impact practices embedded in them, such as diversity designation, undergraduate research, community-based learning, as well as sophomores that bookend the beginning and end levels. In addition, we have a number of elective courses that students can then pick from depending on their specific interest. But our 400 level electives, which all students must go through a 400 level course, it either has a community-based learning component or a research applied component. We have a vibrant internship program. And just to summarize the number of ways that students can engage with community-based learning, at the most recent count, I counted that there are at least 8 courses that had some type of community-based learning component embedded into it. The end result is that by the time a student graduates with a degree in communication, they would have gone through at least 6 high impact practices, at least 1 or more community-based learning project. And I'll comment more about the CBL work and its connection with civic engagement later on. But that's the context, and that's how we have embedded civic engagement in direct and indirect ways in our curriculum.
That's fantastic. Nasrin, what are you doing and what's different about the design you chose at Texas Women's?
Thank you so much, Caryn. Let me share my screen with you all. So thank you for letting us to tell you a little bit about our department as well as what we do in our program. So Texas Women's University is a Hispanic institution and is the largest public university for women in the United States. There's 88% women, and we have over 25% Hispanic. In the chemistry department, we have over 88%, 85% women, and 47% are first generation students. And we are ranked 4th nationally. In the department, we have various degrees. Some of them I have listed here, but just recently we are still trying to finish up the approval. We will have an environmental chemistry, BS in environmental chemistry in the fall of 23. And so far we have had just track of environmental chemistry. One of the things you see as soon as we go to our website is our vision and mission statement. I just wanted to show that the students, if they are interested in our department or in program, the first thing they see, as I highlighted, we work on educating socially responsible and civically engaged chemists and biochemists. That's the mission of our students, and we try to carry over that over the 4 years students are here. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the plan or design we have for our undergraduate students. As they move up in their classes, they see various examples of civic engagements. When students, they join us, the first semester, the first year, they take 2 courses of chemistry, chemistry 1 and chemistry 2, that they come up, they have a lab with them. In those courses, what we do usually during the laboratory experiments, we address social issues such as sustainability, water quality, safety, and some basic laboratory skills they need to have. For instance, one of the experiments that they do in the general chemistry class is they convert aluminum, they make Play-Doh to aluminum, from the aluminum cans, they make Play-Doh. So that's just showing the importance recycling and reusing the materials they have, and importance of sustainability. In the first year of chemistry, they get the introduction to green chemistry. Green chemistry is very important and has been carried in American Chemical Society and environmental EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. What it is just basically making sure that we reduce and eliminate use and generation of toxic substances. So we introduced the idea to our students. In the second year, our majors, they take 2 semesters of organic chemistry. So as some of you have may taken it or thought about organic chemistry, there is a lot of chemicals involved. One of the things the students do, they try to replace the solvents, which are chemicals, toxic and not really safe for the environment, with some other better, like water. Instead of solvents, we use microwave technology, which is energy efficient and uses less energy, but also you can use, like, we try to eliminate using some catalyst, which is basically toxic materials. And they also take physics during the second year, physics 1 and physics 2. And we also introduce the conservation of energy part of it to the students. What they do, they learn about basically the, I guess, not environmentally friendly aspect of carbon-based sources, and we study the renewable energy. So they get a little bit of the effects of the energy there. During the higher classes, so students take a bunch of different classes as they go during the advanced courses. We have, like, for instance, environmental chemistry, instrumental analysis. What they do in those courses, for instance, one of the examples, their projects all have some kind of a civic engagement aspect to it. Our students collect water, soil, they study those contaminations. One of the things they have been doing, looking in the soils and figuring out what kind of plastics they see in it. So the pictures you see is like the students collected soil, and then they looked at the plastics in it. Sometimes classes, they collaborate, faculty, they collaborate with each other. And also the last thing is like seminar courses. One of the things we do, our undergraduate students, they require to take seminar courses. What it is we bring speakers, they talk to our students, but as part of this course, we make sure our students are getting trained in responsible conduct of research, because undergraduate research is very important in our department. So they need to know, like, what kind of social and personal and ethic responsibility they have. As part of this class also, we have a documentary that it's about the German chemist Haber. They watch it, and what happens, Haber was the one fixed nitrogen to increase the food production. So he basically helped mankind with the food production, but along the way, what he did, he some kind of invented first weapon of mass destruction, which this chemical warfare was used in World War I. So it's a really challenging documentary to watch for the scientists, for our students. And it's becoming like the subject they talk about here is ethics in science, civic and moral responsibilities. We discussed this in our seminar, and the students sometimes they write a paragraph figuring out, as a scientist, what would you do? So that's a very interesting documentary we show our students. So that's all I have for you, and thank you.
I did want to say that one of the things that we learned about majors is there was from a NESE research that was saying that of the seniors who responded to the survey, there was a huge gap between those whose majors dealt with social issues. And the highest was the social scientists at 78. The lowest was the physical sciences, math, and computer science at 38%. So as a chemistry and biochemistry major, you are breaking the boundaries by making sure all the students who take your courses are exposed to social issues. And I think that's true in yours as well. Raven, we wanted to talk to you about how in the world you made your way to the major you did. Get some insight on how students go about choosing it and what kind of factors were important to you as a student looking for a major.
Well, it's quite interesting, because if you had asked me in high school that I was going to be a chemistry major, I'd be like, no way, I hate chemistry. But when I got to college, I was initially going to go into kindergarten education, because someone told me I'd be good at it. And I was like, okay. So I kind of picked it as a whim, because I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to further my education, but at that time I didn't really know what I wanted and what I could do with it. So very quickly I realized before I even got to college officially at orientation, I was like, okay, not education. So I changed to nursing because I was like, I want to help people in some way. And that following semester, I did anatomy and physiology. I was like, okay, a little boring. And so I was talking to my anatomy teacher, and she had told me, as I was telling her my interest, she's like, it doesn't sound like you want to be a nursing major. It sounds like you want to do research in environmental stuff. So she suggested I change my major to biology, which moved me out of her department into a different department, which I'm very thankful for, that she didn't want to keep me in somewhere where I don't think I would have excelled as much as I have now. So I changed to biology, and then I took chemistry that following spring. And I was like, wow, this is a lot better than I remember. I had a really good teacher. I had Dr. Lee at our school. He's very, very sweet and very, very good at what he does. And I had a really great TA who was the president of a environmental justice group called Roots. And she got me interested in that group. And then I met the faculty member in charge of that, Cynthia McGuire. So when I went to talk to Miss McGuire, as I became president of this club, she was listening to me talk about chemistry, and I was like, I enjoyed it, and I want to do environmental research. And she told me that our department that had just developed a new track in environmental chemistry. And so I changed my major that day. And before I got to my dorm, after I changed my major, I had an email from Doc and Dr. Kohan about joining this team about zero impact and sensor. And they hooked me in, and they're like, if you want to work with environmental stuff, we have this project where we want to make a zero impact event. So when we hold events, we're helping the environment and not harming it further and trying to lower our impact on everything. And so I was planning with some upperclassmen, and then I had just changed my major, and I just felt welcomed and very grateful. And as I started going through my classes, like, I realized there were so many more issues, and they would just tell me about all these sort of things I could be doing. And I was just really amazed. I didn't realize how important public responsibility would be to me when I was first coming into college. But the more I heard it, the more I realized, why am I not focusing on this more? Why did no one tell me I could do all these things and help so many people and help the environment? So it was just a really great thing that when they told me about these things and being guided to a place where people thought I would be interested in, it just really helped me become, I think, a better scientist. And I look forward to doing a lot more research and working with a bunch of awesome people in the future.
Thank you so much, Raven. I'm so glad so many people along the way gave you the kind of advice, good, solid career and knowledge advice, as well as involving you in the co-curricular piece. That's an important thing for us to remember as academics. And I did want to say that you also represent a kind of counter trend from what other research has shown between how, a certain amount of progress we've made in helping students feel either informed on the importance of contributing to the larger good, but that most of them focus on being informed and discussing it, and to some extent raising awareness. But when we move to actually doing it, like zero impact, thinking about that and actually working with a group of people to do it, that the numbers drop. So people on public, bigger, national, state, and global, 69% of the students said that they had, sort of invested in informing themselves. But if you ask them, well, have you organized others to work with you on the things that you're now caring about? Only 11% said yes. So this is another area where there's a big gap in the way we organize our majors, and the kind of activities in the curricular clubs that go alongside the majors make a big difference. Well, let me go back to you, Nasrin, and then to Theresa to talk a little bit more about how you got to the wonderful slides and designs that clearly didn't happen after one quick department meeting. And
Thank you. Yes, Caryn, thank you. So actually one of the main force behind the whole thing, Dr. Sherody, he's in this call. So in 2007, so there are two big things in our department. One is like we are a member of Censor. I'll explain what that is. And the other one is our experiential learning through the university. So in 2007, we become a member of Censor community. Censor stands for Science Education for New Civic Engagements and Responsibility. Is a reform project funded by National Science Foundation and advocates for teaching courses with incorporating unsolved public issues and civic engagement in science and courses to enhance students' learning. So our faculty have been attending workshops, I've been attending the conferences organized by Censor, and also our regional meetings that have learned how to incorporate civic engagement. And it's not just science, it started just to be for science courses, but now it's everybody, every class, they can incorporate those examples. We are actually the Southwest chapter of the Censor, and we host various annual symposium. We're bringing people from all over the place that they have done some kind of civic engagement in their work. So we kind of learn from others and we incorporate things in our courses. But also in 2012, our university had experiential learning program, or it's our QP, Quality Enhancement Plan, and it was mandated by Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. So what it was is like basically inviting a faculty and students to do experiential learning. So some of our faculty started their civic projects as a result of the QP for our university, and we got support from the university and our experiential learning office. Thank you.
And Theresa?
So I'm not going to tell the story in as much of a chronological line, but what I want to highlight are three aspects, three contributing factors: department culture, departmental policies, and institutional support. So as I mentioned, before I even started at UW-Parkside in the department, there was already a department culture that focused on and prioritized civic engagement and community-based learning, even though it might not have been labeled as such then, but basically it's one of the things that attracted me to coming to the department in the first place. So it was very welcoming and encouraging of such pedagogical initiatives, and it was already built into the curriculum. And as I've been here, it's been more a matter of refining it over the years, such that I entered into a department where all of my colleagues were engaged in similar type of work, even though we are coming from different subfields in the discipline. The second aspect, departmental, I guess, policies. So it's not just something that we talk about, but also it's written into our personnel guidelines. So for example, if someone is engaged in CBL, community-based learning work, it's positively acknowledged in for research or teaching, depending on our service, sometimes all of the above, depending on what they're doing. When we write our position descriptions, we are explicit about saying, you know, we are would welcome colleagues who would be able to contribute to our work in community-based learning, our diversity, as well as other initiatives. And third, institutional support. So I've mentioned our Center for Community and Business Engagement. That office helps, if you are interested in doing CBL work, that office can help pair you up with a community partner. To have your course be designated as a CBL course, there's a formal process that it has to go through as a way of having an external party check through your syllabus to see, are you addressing civic engagement outcomes and helping you in developing those type of outcomes. And just as one last example, minor example for institutional support, I'm sorry, two, I lied. We have a campus civic action plan. So that helps to communicate at an institution-wide level that it's supported. And the last example, since I guess I'm immersed in it right now, we're currently filling out our annual faculty, our annual evaluations. In that, our institution has built in a box to indicate if your course is a community-based learning course. So that, to me, is sending a clear signal or message that this is something that's valued and that we recognize can be, should be perhaps integrated throughout the curriculum.
Okay, thank you so much. We want to take a pause now to let those of you in the audience pose a question to one of the presenters or make a comment. And if you don't mind turning it on, if you want to ask a question, if you would kindly turn your video on, if that's possible, and use the hand designation so I can find you. Anybody sitting there with? Give you another minute or two. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and then just turn to our panelists again to describe one or two of the signature pedagogies that you think really were like liftoff rockets for this new kind of learning that makes civic a particularly civic rich experience for students in their major. And we'll go ahead and begin with you, Theresa.
Well, let's see. So I mentioned community-based learning as part of this, and I guess I want to divide up my answer between what I've already touched on as well as one new campus-wide initiative. With community-based learning, we would partner with a nonprofit organization, and my colleagues and I have engaged in projects working with organizations such as drug awareness and prevention, a hospice organization. When the pandemic hit, I had my health communication students do a project creating a media toolkit to address vaccine hesitancy among college students. So I feel that that's one of our signature pedagogies that's supported, as I mentioned, in the department as well as outside of the department. The second initiative, and this is something wearing more of my hat as past faculty director of internships and now vice provost, is a course called UWP 294 called Work-Based Learning. This is a course that we developed recognizing that not all of our students could do internships because of their heavy course load. And so the work-based learning course would be a way for students to earn credit in conjunction with their work experiences. The reason why I'm bringing up that in relation to this particular example is because one of the things that we were asked to think about is not just how civic engagement connects to the major, but also to professional experiences. That course that I mentioned, work-based learning, is a general education course. And as part of that, it addresses social and personal responsibility. And there's a specific assignment in there called a civic workplace responsibility assignment, where students have to study their own workplace to identify how does that workplace address and engage with maybe not, but hopefully how does it engage with issues of workplace responsibility. So we have I would say a signature pedagogy that I touched on with the community-based learning, but also a new, I guess, innovation that my campus is working with and trying to better integrate work experiences with learning experiences and civic engagement.
It's great. And it's so important. Most people, or too many people, just automatically assume that civic learning and civic engagement is going to happen after work hours and over the weekends and on vacation, probably not on vacation, but in your community, which of course it should, but it's also an everyday ethical thing, which I think is what you're trying to introduce to your students, Texas Women's, that there are these ethical, moral issues, and there are these that one needs to grapple with in the workspace that have real public consequences. And then there are public things you can work on together, worry about the water. So these are really important to take it into the workplace. I put one resource that I did with the Kettering Foundation and several people who were thinking deeply about the relationship of civic learning to the workplace and what kind of preparation for work we actually needed, and how important responsibility, ethical things, working across difference, all of these things that make for a stronger democracy are also really good things to have in the workplace. So what you were just describing, Theresa, about analyzing the workplace that you're in is really a wonderful way of teaching the students how to be an anthropologist in their workplace and to really pay attention to what they're doing. And Nasrin.
Sure, I'm going to quickly highlight two initiatives we do in our department. One, Raven kind of mentioned our zero impact project. So in 2020, we had our regional meeting. The title, a focus was impact on our communities by plastics in our environment. So we started thinking that if we're gonna talk about impact of plastics, we have to stop using plastic and eliminating as much as possible. We call it zero, but we're trying to go that way. So that symposium in 2020 was organized by a group of TW students, including Raven, and faculty in collaboration with Dr. Middlecam and her students from University of Wisconsin. So the Zero Impact team, they came up with various plans and suggestions for us how to eliminate plastic as much as possible. How do we use reusable materials? How to apply the sustainable plans and practices we learn in the classroom in actual events. For example, they came up with the reusable name tags, or like just using, like we bought a bunch of dishes, so we reuse those. We don't have to throw away everything we're using. And even students and faculty, we learn how much plastics we use when we stop using them. And taking care of our environment is one of the most important civic engagement, at least for the chemistry department. We have to take care of our chemicals and everything we're doing, but we also addressing all of the issues of using plastic. So our students got to be involved and learning about that. And since 2020, all of our events are held as zero impact events. So, and our students are ready to help anybody else on our campus or anywhere else if they need suggestion and plan for that. Another project I'm going to quickly mention, from 2016, we started poster show at the mall. What it was a campus-wide event that we asked all of the students, they have their scientific technical posters. We asked them to translate it to the public language in a way that they substituted their basically our fancy terminology, but words that public could understand. So on a Saturday morning, all of our students, they presented their posters to the public. There was a lot of benefits to that. Few things I can quickly mention. One, our own students, this might have been their first presentation to the public. It's one of the hardest to do, trying to change your language to the public language. So they learn how to speak to the public. Why this is important? If our students, as a scientist or as a educators, they educated folks, they can talk to the policy makers, and they can talk about the science. That's the most important civic engagement, especially these days. And also, it was important for our taxpayers, our Denton community where we are, to know that their taxes are going to the research that is benefiting them at the end of the day. And we are a women university. We had a lot of examples, women can do things. So in terms of diversity, there's a lot of aspects of it. And we wrote an article. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer, but I will put the article in the chat for you all. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Well, Raven, you had the benefits of being an undergraduate in this department. What kind of experiences mattered most to you as a student that deepened your understanding of the public or ethical implications of being an environmental scientist?
Yes. So when I first had changed my major, I mentioned that I got put on that zero impact team that we have at our school. And I think that was like that first thing that really got me really invested. And it was a lot of times, I think places are like, hey, come join this kind of thing. But it wasn't like that here. It was more like they're like, hey, you can do this. Because I think people forget that many, especially younger students, because I wasn't sure of myself, I didn't know I was actually capable of doing these things. I didn't feel confident enough to go walk up to someone and say, hey, I want to do this and I think I can do it well, because I didn't believe that. I was asked and I was like, hey, if I've been asked, at least they think I can do it. So I'll try. And I think Dr. Kohan and Doc could both speak to, like, I was probably much shyer when I was a when I first starting off, I was a lot quieter, and I've grown in confidence in public speaking. And I think that has, being able to speak to people, I think is one of the best things you can get out of working on projects, because that's what life is going to be. You're going to be speaking to people because you have to work with people to get things done. You can't just sit in a tiny little cocoon of safety, which I used to love to be in. Additionally, whenever I joined that team, when I had mentioned I wanted to do undergraduate research, and I still didn't feel confident enough to go ask at the time my now research professor team, I had another one of our professors ended up telling him that I was interested, and he was like, okay, yeah, come talk to me, come join. And so then I started doing research with him, and I work with trying to recycle plastics in order to try and mitigate our electronic waste issue that's been growing. And I don't know, it's just been, they really try here at TWU, they really try to put us in a place where they think we'd enjoy it, and where the world will get the most of us, and we get the most from the world, I think. So, and they never let us forget how important it is. Every class, every semester, it's always one of our teachers is talking about something civic engagement or environmental problems, issues of people, which is just important, because I think a lot of times we forget to continue talking about that, especially in our upper level science classes. It can be often just forgotten about because you have to learn all your amino acids or something, and that's important, but there's also big issues that we should be focusing on as well. So I think that was the best part of all my experiences.
That's great. I did want to say that part of what you were describing is, you've got to get out there, you've got to talk to people, you've got to do some things, is really developing a kind of public self and a kind of civic identity that goes along with that, whether that's in the mall or in your workplace, where in fact or with your with your friends on campus, the campus as civic space, because it certainly is the community in which students live. So that's a really important contribution from both these majors, and that those of you in the audience that are, faculty members from philosophy, sociology, psychology, we've got a lot of different majors out there, might want to consider what ways you are contributing to the kinds of things Raven just described, and that I think are underscored by Theresa's opening by saying, we have this mission to engage students in the world. I mean, to have them be part of that public engagement, and Nasrin with the educating socially responsible, critically engaged chemists and biochemists. You've touched, Theresa touched a little bit on this, but let me give a little more space in our minutes left. There's a lot of recognition now that the major is for students a pathway to some kind of career. We know that many students do not take careers in what they majored in. They don't be an English major and become an English teacher. Some of the people that take the chemistry will not become chemists and biochemists. So, but most of the students will have some relationship from their major to the work that they do in the world. And I wondered if you could reflect on why it's important to have civic engagement and public responsibility part of that preparation, and if so, how you convey that to students. And Nasrin, do you want to begin by?
Sure. I think Raven was just an example here, how you develop your leadership, communication skills. So that's an excellent example of students developing that, but also not only we teaching communication, critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, work ethic, those are in most classes, but when we teach our students civic engagement, we are teaching them ethical thinking, and they look at their disciplines with a civic lens. And one of the things the students get out of that is valuable experience, that they become a responsible citizen. They can make informed career and financial decisions. And when they have a better understanding and what they can do, they would know their own value, and they will have the confidence to go to jobs and make a difference there. And at the end of the day, one of the relationship is when they see the civic problems, issues, I don't think they want to stop. I mean, I've talked to the students, they want to go on, and so the careers usually is related to what they have learned and to do. Another thing I want to add is diversity. One of the things is like when students they do civic engagements and they become part of the community, there is this retention, and they feel belonging because they are part of the community, they are part of the team they are working with. And this is usually true in underserved students when they feel like that belonging and they are part of the team and are working on civic issues. There's issues that relates to them personally and their community. They have retention, they finish up. So we indirectly increasing diversity, especially in STEM fields, that it's really, we need to increase those numbers. So civic engagements prepare students to be better citizens and make informed decisions. At the end of the day, they will carry on that torch, and Raven is an example, an excellent example. That's why she's here, and she gets involved in a lot of things. So yes, but thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And Raven, do you want to say a little bit more? You're getting closer to professing yourself as a chemist. Do you want to talk about how civic engagement and public responsibility are important there?
Yes, I personally am probably going to be very into what my major is. I'm going to be probably straight up chemist in the future because I really enjoy it. But I think what's super important in like having that civic engagement portion in your major is that your major is kind of like your toolbox of what you can do. And the civic engagement is how you can use those tools. And that's just so important because you don't know what you can do with something. So some things are very abstract in a lot of your classes and you don't know how you can use it. But when you're working on these projects, you can see how you can use what you've learned to fix it. Or it also, that civic engagement may help you understand how to do something in your class. Because if you come at things, it just helps. And if everyone's doing that, you have so many different angles you're coming at things from. And just, it's fun. It makes it more enjoyable. I don't know how you could just not be civically engaged. I think it's just because I've only really had those highly civic engaged conversations in my classes that I don't understand that there's not those things sometimes. Because I thought, oh, this is normal. But it just makes it just more fun and you really feel like you're doing something. And I think with majors like chemistry and biochemistry, a lot of times we end up focusing so much on those tiny little details of things we forget our big picture of what we're doing it for. So I think it's really important to remind that, and it will help us have better professors in the future. Not that my professors are great, so that's not anything bad about my professors. They're the best people in the world. But like sometimes you hear students say like, my professor didn't really care about this. They cared about the research, not about me. And I think that's something I don't really see at TW. So I think it just helps people in their careers and see where their careers are going to go after they graduate, even if it's not particularly what they majored in.
Right. Thank you. And Theresa, you had said, you'd hinted at the connection with the major. Did you want to say a few more things about that and communications, especially in a period where we see so many problematic anti-democratic communication examples out there?
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, what I would say is within our major, what we focus on and try to emphasize is thinking about communication and what kind of impact it has within the broader context of society. And in terms of impact, I mean, it gets at a broad range of issues such as who has voice, who doesn't have voice, what kind of communication practices can help in terms of people speaking and participating in society, and conversely, what kind of communication practices can stifle hearing voices and diverse perspectives, and also focusing on the fact that there's more than one story out there, and so it's very important to be aware of what are the alternative narratives and stories out there. And I briefly saw my former colleague Faye Kinda is in here. She was the one that helped tune me into that idea of diverse narratives. I also want to say, I guess, addressing this question and some of the themes about the impact on students. My colleague, Adrian Viramontes, and I did a study a few years ago looking at the impact of community-based learning on first-generation students in our major. And some of the things that students told us is that in engaging in these type of educational learning practices, it helped give them a sense of belonging in the classroom. And one of the things that my colleague Adrian and I discovered too in the process of doing this study is that it decentered knowledge in the classroom. So rather than the professor being the one who's professing and giving knowledge, it turned the classroom itself into a more democratic learning environment, in that it was the professor co-learning with the student and applying disciplinary knowledge to a specific context. And I guess one last thing I want to say in commenting on this general topic, I feel are pretty upfront with our students in this balance of talking about the importance of what are you learning in terms of critical thinking, problem solving, critical engagement, and careers. We tell them this will help with careers and these are specific careers, but we also are upfront in saying the careers are going to change. So we're more concerned that you have this toolkit to help you for whatever new careers are on the horizon.
That's great. Thank you so much. I wanted to lift up a question that had come from the audience, but before I do, I just wanted to point out to people I've put in the chat a few resources around that remind us that diversity is important, both in terms of who your students are, first generation students of color, women in science, whatever. But in fact, the whole experience and study of diversity ends up contributing to students' democratic awareness and civic capacities. So several people have looked at that, Tania Mitchell, Sylvia Hurtado, Linda D'Angelo at UCLA, and others. And there's a lot more out there about that, but to see these as really complementary and integral to each other. I wanted to pick up a question from, although I think she might have left, from Alice at Buffalo State, because she said, Theresa, that it looked like you had a lot of similarities to your own campus, and that it looks like you have a lot of things that reinforce teaching CBL courses. But what about the faculty who are not engaged on your campus? Have your community partners encountered faculty who are not prepared for the community work they take on?
Okay,
Yeah, and I am here. Sorry, I typed my question, but I've been sick all weekend, so that's why my camera's off. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, I mean, just there's these great incentives, but then I've also, and I'm pretty new to I'm still new to this campus. I started last March. So I've noticed that with some faculty, it's a challenge in terms of their this takes a lot of work, right? And I think sometimes the incentives are like encouraging faculty to engage who really are not prepared to engage, either time-wise or just in terms of really the curriculum for community-based learning. So I just wanted to hear your perspective from your campus.
Thank you, Alice.
Well, I guess I'll say that I wouldn't assume that all faculty will be engaged, and that's okay. People are going to be engaged in different ways. So you want to have, I guess, enough faculty so that there will be overall some rich community-based learning options for students. And the other thing I want to say, I guess looking at your second question about community partners working with faculty, sometimes that happens, but I will say some of the things that our campus does to help prepare faculty to work with community partners is that we've had a tradition of offering summer professional development workshops, and we have a community-based learning fellows program. And I guess I'll give a quick shout out to Amy Garrigan, who I see has logged in, and her wonderful work in co-facilitating that program. And so that's one of the things our campus has done to help prepare faculty for engaging with community partners. Is it always perfect? No, and it's not always perfect on both ends. But I will say, I think that is part of the preparation, is preparing all parties, faculty, students, community partners, for encountering that uncertainty. But while there is uncertainty and there might be glitches, that's part of the learning experience. It's part of life. Life doesn't, as we know from the pandemic, life does not work out as planned. And so that's part of the richness of the CBL experience. But to help prepare, I guess, faculty and community partners, we have those professional development experiences and opportunities, as well as a staff that can work with partners and faculty as they're doing their CBL experiences. And Amy, if you want to say anything more or type anything in the chat about that, you're welcome to do so. Oh, yay, Amy.
You'll have to unmute me, Amy, if you're gonna, yes, thank you.
Well, hi, everyone. Theresa, I think covered it brilliantly. And really, I would echo that our summer professional development program does go a long way, I think, in preparing faculty. And sometimes that means they go through the program and decide this really actually isn't the good fit for me, and that's okay. So it does, I think, once they have adequate information, realize this isn't really what they want to do. And maybe just one other thing I would throw out is that we do have like a project agreement form template where we work with faculty and the community partner to kind of have expectations laid out from the beginning. And that has helped in cases too, to sort of just be sure that expectations are clear on both ends.
I just want to share an example. I hope I'm citing the right university, University of Nebraska at Lincoln, where they had decided that they wanted to acknowledge and be more engaged in the Latina community throughout the curriculum. It wasn't just the major. And what they did was organize a summer faculty thing in which the community leaders became the teachers. So the faculty went through they went through what the students would go through. That is, they came and they listened to the community people talk about their experience at the workplace, or their experience in trying to get housing, or what it was like in the schools, or what it was like in being subjugated to some police harassment. So and they brought in the police who talked about what it meant to be a policeman in a diverse city like Nebraska. So the faculty, became the student in all of this, and the expert were the community people. And I think that shifting of the power dynamics was absolutely critical for the faculty. Whatever they taught, whether in fact they did experiential or not, it would really teach them a lot about that. It was a very fine thing. I think
thank you to everybody. I just want to say.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we are getting close to the end time. I did want to say to you all that we have more to go tomorrow, in which there will be from 2 to 5:30 again, with a focus on how this is working out in policy at different kinds of institutions. And I wanted to share some interesting things from this morning's opening plenary, in which David Scobie, Eboo Patel, Ron Crutcher, and Melody Barnes, in which they reinforced a lot of what was said here. They talked about the importance of giving students experience where they weren't just learning new things, though that was critical to sort of learn core knowledge, but also do something with that knowledge, and also learn how to collaborate across deep differences sometimes, but do that in order to get things done, things that would work better in the Congress if that were and another language that I liked a lot was David Scobie saying we need to uncover the civic importance of particular study or careers. So the ways in which people have begun to name what they're doing as civic really matters. Willamette named their department Civic Communication after a long history of being a very stellar communications department, but realized this would imply they were supposed to do something with that. The English department, my field at Lehigh, renamed English Literature and Social Justice. And they came to that decision through discussing with her and thought, oh, we don't have to organize, we can still do our genres, we can still do our historical people teaching, but we will do it under these unified big civic questions, which I think are conundrums that you talked about being really good. Nasrin, you talked about that being really an important thing for your students in chemistry and biochemistry to wrestle with these tough moral questions that someone like Haber puts before us. So I hope all of this has inspired you to think and go back and think of other ways you can make a more civic rich experience for the majors in your department and on your campus. And I want to particularly thank Raven and Nasrin and Theresa for doing all the hard work that allows us to say it can be done. This is one of the ways it looks like, and it will all be contextual to your campus, to your discipline, but it can be done. And there's growing evidence around the country that the majors is a really excellent place to embed civic learning for a diverse democracy and a globally connected world like ours. So thank you all, particularly to our panelists for coming, and to those of you who've stuck it out till 5:31. Thank you very much.